When the current administration started cutting National Park Service jobs, my old post at the Everglades abruptly ended. They sacked almost everyone, leaving us with barely enough severance to cover the next month. I was surprised. I was pissed. I was devastated. But my supervisor had already lined up another gig, and he was able to bring one more law enforcement ranger with him. A week after my dismissal, he called and asked if I wanted to go out for a cup of joe. "You've always been there for me, no matter the situation," Bruce said over a steaming mug of black coffee. My supervisor was a bear of a man. Bushy beard, 6'5", 240 pounds. Built like a lumberjack. I trusted him like a brother. There's nothing more important in this line of work than loyalty. And out of all the rangers at that godforsaken swamp, you were the most devoted. "Thank you," I said, unsure of where this was going. Sensing my impatience, Bruce launched into his offer. "Look. I've got some friends in the BLM. There's this wildlife preserve. It's contract work. 6 months, but there's an opportunity for extension. Are you?" "Yes. I am," Bruce said. "You good to move to Northern California?" I didn't have anything tying me to South Florida at the time, but the distance caught me off guard. This was clear across the country, and I wanted to know where I'd be spending the better half of the year. "Is it Golden Gate?" Visions of the majestic San Francisco Bay flashed before my eyes. "The location's classified," Bruce said. "It's not a park with visitors." Oh. That sounded ominous. "Is it military?" "Look. All I can tell you right now is it's easy work, the easiest job you've ever had. Oh, and the pay is triple what you made in the Glades." "Why yeah. Sounds great," I said. "It's probably in the Bay Area," I thought. "The cost of living there is much higher." Bruce slid a nondescript manila folder across the table. I reached out to open it, but he kept his meaty hand flat atop its cover. "There's just one thing I need to know before we go any further." I leaned back, suddenly aware of how quiet the coffee shop had grown. Is this some kind of drug thing?" I whispered. I knew about a lot of marijuana grow operations up in NorCal. Bruce fixed me with a steely gaze. "Meth," he said. I spit up my cappuccino. "Whoa. I don't know." But Bruce erupted into a rumbling laugh that was part growl. "I'm just fucking with ya, dude. The site's restricted due to environmental concerns, and you just have to sign an NDA before I tell you anything else." Oh, I let out a sigh and opened the folder to an 80-page document of boilerplate legalese. My new post was a wildlife preserve called McNeely Pines. I arrived a few days after signing my NDA. I flew out to Sacramento, then drove for a few hours through winding mountainous roads with nary a town or gas station in sight. I left all traces of civilization far behind and entered the pure, untrammeled wilderness that intimated westward settlers centuries ago. The sun had just set when I finally arrived at the ranger station. It was an old timber-built hunting lodge repurposed by the government, 2 stories tall, with a series of radio antennas sprouting from its roof. There was something off about the place, but it took me a while to realize what. It wasn't until after I'd moved into my room upstairs, taken a nice hot shower, and settled into bed that I noticed. All the windows were reinforced with metal bars. Bruce gave me a tour of the property the next day. It was just the 2 of us working the park. Cell reception was spotty, but we had a high-tech comms room in the station for communicating with the outside world if needed. The preserve encompassed 10,000 acres of mountainous forest full of towering pines whose expansive canopies blocked out most sunlight, even in the middle of the day. The forest looked pristine. No trash. No roads. Plenty of wildlife. But it was inaccessible. A 15-foot tall chain-link fence topped with razor wire surrounded the whole area. No one was allowed inside except with express permission from the federal government. Before my arrival, Bruce said the location of the preserve had been quarantined. But I never imagined it would be like this. What did they have in there, mutant grizzly bears? I asked as the two of us drove along the perimeter in a park-issued ATV. Deer mostly, Bruce said. It's not just to keep the animals in, but also to keep people out. Now that I was on site, my supervisor could explain the whole situation. Apparently, a railway runs through the McNeely Forest Wildlife Preserve. It's shut down now, but for decades it serviced freight trains. Most carried simple goods, foodstuffs, lumber, sheet metal. But occasionally, they transported hazardous materials. One such train was carrying over 200 tons of toxic chemicals, including vinyl chloride, ethylene glycol, ethylhexyl acrylate, and butyl acrylate, when it derailed in the middle of the forest 5 years ago. The resulting spill covered much of the land. Fortunately, there was no civilization nearby, so the story didn't garner much news outside of a few small articles in local newspapers. After the initial cleanup operation, the EPA ordered a quarantine of the whole forest for at least 20 years, subject to further restrictions if testing didn't improve. Our job's making sure no one except the EPA enters or leaves the forest, Bruce said. The fencing had one gate, located next to the ranger station. Bruce and I were the only ones with the code to open it. Bruce was right. The job was easy. Outside of handling the main gate, I managed a series of trail cameras placed every 100 meters or so along the perimeter fence. The cameras faced both inside and outside the preserve. If I caught anyone trying to break through the fence, I was to arrest them on sight. That was it. The government covered lodging and delivered free groceries every other week, so I was raking in pure profit for almost no work. It was perfect. Still, it left me with a lot of questions. Why did we need so many trail cams? There were literally hundreds watching every inch of the park. I'd never seen so many before, even at larger parks. And this was on top of the daily patrols Bruce and I made in the park ATVs. Furthermore, when I first checked the cameras, I noticed the fencing had odd markings. Nothing major. Just this faint script. You could only see it when you were right up against the fence. There were these little scribbles etched into the metal chain links. It looked like some kind of writing, but I couldn't make out any of it. I asked Bruce about it one night. He said the etchings were a company signature. The Park Service hired a special company to make the fence extra strong and resilient against the elements. Anti-rust and whatnot. Jesus, they've spent a fortune on this quarantine operation, I thought. Each evening, I'd upload all the footage from the trail cams and review it for any anomalies. The cameras only captured images if there was movement in the frame, so most of it showed branches swaying in the wind or a squirrel running by the lens. Occasionally, a deer or raccoon would approach the fence from within the quarantine zone. The preserve had a surprising amount of wildlife given its toxic backstory, though the animals never appeared to look or act abnormal. With all the hazardous shit in there, it's a miracle anything's alive, I told Bruce one night as we drank whiskey and watched old episodes of Everybody Loves Raymond. The lodge didn't have internet access, but it came with an expansive collection of DVDs. I dunno. Life's pretty resilient, I guess, he said. No matter what the world puts it through. What we put it through, I said, referring to the toxic spill. Bruce nodded. Still have to put them down if any manage to break through the fencing. Yeah, I said. I didn't relish the thought of shooting mutant deer. The first couple of months were monotonous, checking trail cams, maintaining the ATVs, watching too many episodes of Friends. and, every so often, letting EPA officials through the main gate. Each week, 2 black SUVs would arrive at the station, and a half-dozen men and women in pristine white hazmat suits would pile out, carrying nondescript equipment boxes. They weren't much for conversation. "Just running more tests," one of them said. It was the longest sentence any of them had ever spoken to me. I'd input my gate code, and the group would disappear into the seemingly endless forest. Sometimes for 30 minutes. Sometimes a whole day. Neither Bruce nor I ever accompanied them. What if they need protection? I asked him, thinking about potential animal attacks. "They can handle themselves," Bruce replied. "The hazmats are enough." I suddenly became aware that neither of us had worn so much as a face mask while patrolling the forest for hours each day, and here were these people in full bodysuits. Should we be wearing anything? Nah. "The spill site's far, far in the interior," Bruce said. "We're well outside the range of anything dangerous." "That's what they tell us, at least," I said, chuckling. "Yeah. True." Bruce laughed. "What did you think they do in there for so long?" "I dunno. Soil samples? A bonfire rager? Who cares, so long as our check's clear," Bruce said. I nodded, but something still felt off. The EPA officials were so deadly serious whenever they arrived. And they always seemed dazed when they returned from their testing. It was like they'd been through the ringer in there. Their blank, expressionless faces reminded me of someone in shock. One day, I noticed a syrupy red liquid leaking from one of their equipment boxes as they exited. I almost asked what it was, but the officials quickly scrambled back into their SUVs and waved goodbye before driving off. "It has to be blood," I told Bruce later that night. "There's nothing else it could be. Are they killing animals in there and bringing them back to some lab for testing?" "Look." Bruce set his whiskey down. "It's best if you don't dwell on it that much." His demeanor suddenly changed, as if I were bringing up a taboo subject. "But this was our job. Don't you want to know what's going on?" I asked. "I mean, the cleanup's the whole point of this place. Quarantine. Clean up the mess. Reopen the park to the public." "I never said the park would reopen to the public," Bruce said. "What?" My supervisor just stared at the flames in the lodge's fireplace. The logs popped and crackled. Then, he downed the rest of his whiskey and started up the stairs. "I'm going to bed. Make sure you put the fire out before heading up." I'd known Bruce for years, but I'd never seen him like this. Everything was hunky-dory for weeks. We were cracking jokes about toxic deer with superpowers. But the moment I brought up that blood-soaked equipment container, it was like I'd touched a raw nerve. He became standoffish, even a bit sad. At first, I thought my hypothesis was correct, and he was angry about the EPA killing animals for testing. But Bruce was never much of an animal lover. Hell, he ate beef almost every day. So he couldn't be that upset. It had to be something else. Something he wasn't telling me. Wouldn't tell me. Or maybe I was overthinking things. There's only so much to occupy your mind in the middle of nowhere. Only so many old TV episodes to watch. So many dusty books on wilderness exploration to read. My job was monotonous. Repetitive. In such situations, the mind tends to search for meaning. Especially when there's a mystery this intriguing. I started my investigation in the comms room. As I mentioned earlier, a big part of my job was reviewing trail camera footage, which I uploaded to a bulky government-issued desktop computer. I was only supposed to review the previous day's footage, but after some digging, I found a folder containing the trail cam archives. There was footage going back to the establishment of the quarantine zone, years before I had arrived. I started with the earliest images. There were no signs of a train crash or fire. But some of the nighttime footage showed human figures staggering out of the forest. They appeared bruised and bloodied, walking in a daze. There were only a couple of them at first. But that number soon expanded to 6, then a dozen, then dozens. What are you doing? I minimized the screen and spun around in my office chair. Bruce had just entered the comms room. Re-reviewing footage from last night. It's 6:30. Time for evening rounds, Bruce said. Oh. Right. Yeah. I closed out of everything and logged off the computer. Bruce stared at me as I left the room. He knows something's up, I thought. He'll see that I accessed those early files. I wanted to say something, but I figured I would ask Bruce about the footage later that night after he'd had his nightly whiskeys. Maybe that would finally get him talking. When I entered the garage to get the ATV, I noticed a massive pair of bolt cutters hanging from a tool shelf nearby. Bruce said they were for EPA emergencies only, such as if the gate wouldn't open, and we needed to cut an exit for the hazmats. I'd never taken the cutters with me on patrol before. What would be the point? I wasn't going to rescue some mutant deer dying from toxic shock. But that night, I don't know what it was, but something compelled me to grab the tools before heading out. They were heavy. Much heavier than normal bolt cutters. I noticed they bore the same odd scribbles as the chain link fence. After grabbing the cutters, I hopped in the ATV. My patrol was to drive the entire park perimeter and check for anything suspicious. There was a service road that ran alongside all 14 miles of fencing. I flipped on the ATV's headlamps. The sun was about to set, and the whole forest was covered in a thick blue gloom. Not quite daylight. Not quite night. A half-light. I drove along the service road at 10 miles per hour, scanning the area as I went. The air felt thick. The forest sounds were muffled, almost as if everything was underwater. It was an eerie atmosphere, unlike anything I'd felt since arriving at McNeely Pines. I soon found out why. Halfway through my patrol, I heard a voice call out. Help! I stopped the ATV, shining a spotlight around the service road. Hello? Who's there? Help! Please! The voice was coming from within the fence. I turned my spotlight to reveal a gaunt figure amid the tall pines. It was a man, mid-40s, skeletal. Ragged clothes barely clung to his emaciated frame. He looked shocked and confused as he staggered towards the fence. Help me! My God, I whispered. I got out of the ATV, my hand on the holster of a taser gun. The man looked like a meth addict I'd encountered in the Everglades once, unpredictable and much stronger than normal. How'd you get in there? This forest is restricted. They're keeping us, the man said. His skin was so sallow and pale it almost glowed. We can't leave. They're horrible. Oh God, they're horrible. Who's keeping you? The demons, the man said. Drool spilled from his lips. Demons everywhere. Stay right there, I said. I'm going to get you help. I returned to the ATV and clicked on my shoulder-mounted radio. Bruce, come in. I'm at mile marker 12. There's a man inside the fence. Says he's being held prisoner. Looks like he might be on something. Keep him there, but don't engage, Bruce said. Don't talk to him. Don't even look at him. I'm coming to assist. Copy that. Who's that? Who are you talking to? Don't let him come here. The man had walked up to the fence, almost close enough to touch it. "Sir, it's going to be okay," I said. "What's your name?" "They don't give us names," the man said. "Only numbers." "Okay. Look, just remain calm, okay? Help is on the way." "No. That man won't help. He'll kill us." I sighed. There was no use arguing with this madman. He's probably some druggy backpacker who wandered a bit too far off the trail and somehow climbed over or dug his way under the fence. Hopefully, he didn't have any exposure to toxic chemicals. I made sure to keep my distance. "We're not supposed to leave the facility or the demons will punish us," the man said. "The demons in white." I said, staring at my phone. The ranger station was roughly 6 miles away. It would take Bruce less than half an hour to arrive after he started up the auxiliary ATV. "Please, sir. You have a kind face," the man said. "I know you'll help us. What's your name?" "Us?" I looked up to see 2 more emaciated people standing beside the gaunt man. One was a woman in her early 20s. And the other was a scared little girl, no more than 6 years old. "Help us. Please," she cried. Tears stained her cheeks. With all 3 of them there, I realized they were wearing similar outfits, plain, beige shirts with matching beige slacks. They didn't even have shoes, only cheap flip-flops. Like the kind you'd wear to a public shower. "Jesus Christ," I said. This was not just some random tweaker. This was something more serious. "Where did you all come from?" "From the facility," the woman said. "What facility?" "We just want to go home." It was the little girl. "Please, sir." She held out her tiny arm. A small, homemade bracelet hung from her bony wrist, just a piece of string with a few buttons as ornaments. "Are you all together?" "We're a family," the gaunt man said, pulling the woman and child close. This was insane. I radioed Bruce again. Bruce. I've got a whole family here. There's a woman and a kid. Just don't engage them in any way," Bruce said. "I'll be there as soon as I can." He sounded out of breath. I heard a faint buzzing sound. Was that the ATV engine? "Bruce? You still there?" The radio only crackled in response. "Forget it. He's not going to help us." The woman tugged on the man's shirt, pulling him away from the fence. "No." I can see the empathy in his face. The man fought to remain where he was. He kept staring at me. I could feel his bloodshot eyes boring into me even as I looked down at my cell phone. It was 8:15 p.m. What was taking Bruce so long? A sudden, gurgling sound drew my attention. Then a woman's scream. I looked up. The little girl had collapsed onto the leafy ground, seizing. Her eyes rolled back as she struggled to breathe. "No. She's going into anaphylactic shock." The woman grabbed a stick from the ground and shoved it in the girl's mouth. Drool spilled from her lips. "She's going to die." The man looked at me, pleading. "Do you have a first aid kit?" I did. A part of me wanted to radio Bruce one more time, but the girl's condition was getting worse by the second, her tiny body racked with violent convulsions. I needed to act. Now. I rushed into the back seat of the ATV, grabbing the first aid kit and bolt cutters. Seconds later, I knelt beside the fencing and started to cut. Snip. 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 "Oh. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you." Snip. I cut the last chain link and a large section of the fence fell away. As soon as it did, an incredible whoosh of air radiated outward. It was a shockwave that knocked me flat on my ass. My head spun. My consciousness flickered like a static TV signal. But in those fleeting moments of lucidity, I saw the family rush through the opening. "We're forever in your debt," the man said before he and his family disappeared into the gloomy woods beyond. I vaguely remember more figures running through the exit afterward, a throng of pale, long-limbed bodies with scythe-like fingers. Then, everything went dark. I awoke in the dirt late the following morning. My mouth was dry, and my head was groggy. Wah! I was still lying beside the fence, which now had a gaping hole. The section I'd cut open was pushed outward as if something massive had squeezed through the gap. I got up. My ATV was still there, but it was dead. The battery juice ran out from running the headlamps all night, and all the gas had burned away. I clicked my shoulder-mounted radio. "Bruce? Come in. Bruce?" There was no response. Where the hell is he? I ended up walking back to the ranger station. I kept radioing my supervisor every few minutes, but only received errant static in response. I knew something had gone terribly wrong, and my decision to cut open that fence was almost certainly the cause of it. Who were those people asking for my help last night? What was the facility they kept talking about? Were they all on something? Was I on something? Was the whole night some toxic-fueled hallucination brought on by the chemicals in the forest? All I knew for sure was that I'd fucked up. Big time. I'll probably lose my job over this, I thought. When I finally arrived back at the lodge, the front door was ajar, and a few of the windows had been broken open. The iron bars covering them were pulled apart. Only someone powerful could do that. Someone or something. There was an awful stench in the air. Flies buzzed everywhere. I pulled out my service revolver and stepped inside. The place was a war zone. Furniture ripped up. Glassware shattered. Tables and desks overturned. And blood splattered everywhere. In the center of the room was all that remained of Bruce. His body had been torn apart, limbs severed, chest cavity ripped open. Something had eaten his internal organs while he was still alive. My former supervisor's face was frozen mid-scream, his glassy eyes wide with terror. I staggered backward, bile rising in my throat. This was too much. But it was about to get much, much worse. That's when I saw what Bruce clutched in his cold, dead hands, a blood-stained government report. Highly classified. After grabbing some pliers from the tool shed, I pried open his rigor mortis-stiffened fingers to access the document. Its contents were somehow more sickening than the carnage that surrounded me. There was no train crash. That was just a cover story to quarantine the area and keep any hunters or tourists out of the woods. The EPA agents I let inside the fence each week were military scientists. They worked at a top-secret research facility deep within McNeely Pines. It didn't even have a name. The report only listed it as the facility. The document had numerous grainy, black and white photos. They showed men, women, and even children in barren cells, heads shaved. Emaciated. Terrified. There were pages of data detailing horrific experiments, tests involving exposure to experimental neurotoxins. The scientists would monitor each person's degradation to learn just how long it took for someone to go blind, for their teeth to fall out, for their heart to stop. I threw the document across the room in disgust. That's when I saw the shredder. A pile of chewed-up pages lay beneath it. There must have been dozens of documents all cut to ribbons. More evidence of the facility. After searching the rest of the lodge, I realized that the report I'd thrown across the room, the one Bruce clutched as he died, was the last bit of hard evidence of the facility left. He'd destroyed everything else. That was the buzzing sound I heard last night. I went over and picked up the blood-stained document, placing it in my satchel. Then, I left the McNeely Pines for good. I drove all night until I found a cheap roadside motel near Yosemite. Once secured in my room, I pulled out the document and photographed each page, uploading them to my Google Drive in case someone burst through the door right then, shot me dead, and burned the document. I needed to make sure this last bit of evidence would remain. As I finally read through the entire report, I noticed that the military had moved on from chemical weapons to arcane ones. The last pages detailed a program involving an ancient Sumerian tablet. There were images of odd scribbles, the same writing etched on the chain-link fencing and bolt cutters. The scientists had performed some sort of blood ritual on one of their subjects, a man in his mid-40s. A grainy black and white photo showed his face. It was the same man who came to me the other night, begging to be let out. The document's last page detailed a procedure where they drained all of this man's blood into a basin made according to ancient specifications. According to the report, a figure rose from the bloody pool an hour later. It was tall and gaunt. And incredibly strong. I'm in that motel room now, debating whether or not to release the full document to the press. It will have to be soon. It won't take long for the government to realize who let their precious assets loose. I wish I could say that I regret what I did. Those things will likely wreak havoc once they find civilization. There will be more casualties, perhaps even innocent ones. But I can't get the images of that frightened family out of my head, pleading for help. No matter what, I know there's still some humanity left inside them. As I drove away from McNeely Pines, I saw one in its true form, 10 feet tall, long-limbed, and hairless, with skin like a shark's hide. It smiled at me in recognition, flashing a mouth full of dagger teeth. Then it waved as I drove past. A tiny bracelet hung from its wrist, a string with a few buttons.